the questions is always coming up. I would just like to ask these questions too.
Sure. I think, look, a big part of the problem with people understanding what's happening in the community is having the right facts. If people have confused facts and other people are confusing them on purpose, then it's hard for them to know who to hold accountable. And if you can't hold the right people accountable, then the people who are supposed to fix it get away with not fixing it because other people are blamed.
Why don't law enforcement do anything about the gangs? Hoekom ons sien die gangsters daar, ons sien vir law enforcement daar, maar vir ons lyk dit law enforcement maak niks nie.
Ek dink law enforcement werk nou baie hard in die gangs. If you look at the last just under 4 years, we've taken almost 1,700 gangs off the street. We are making thousands of drug arrests. But as anybody who has any sense will tell you, you're not going to stop the problems, because to stop the problems, you have to get convictions. You have to go further up the food chain. You have to get the big guys who are bringing the drugs in, who are distributing the drugs, the bosses. And unfortunately, to do that, you need SAPS's investigative power. So there's some stuff we can do. When we see a drug deal or somebody gives us a tip-off, we respond to about 2,200 complaints a day in the city. Many of those are tip-offs. Officers see stuff and they react spontaneously, but a fair amount of what we do, about half, is in response to people asking us. So Metro Police will go, or law enforcement will go, they'll see an offense happening, they'll make an arrest for that offense, but then we have to hand the offender over to SAPS, we have to hand the evidence, the firearm or the drugs, over to SAPS, then the SAPS must investigate it, the investigator must take it to the National Prosecuting Authority, to the public prosecutor must decide whether to prosecute, that then goes to the courts, and then eventually if the person's convicted, they end up in the Department of Correctional Services, in prison or some other sentence, and that whole value chain, all of those steps sit in the hands of the control of national government. The only part we can do is catch the guy with the useful tip-offs from communities and hand them over to SAPS.
Okay. So law enforcement, hulle het die toestemming so om so te sê om dinge to investigate things. They don't have.
Ons magte is meer beperk. We have more limited powers.
So SAPS blok hulle eintlik daar en dan moet dit na SAPS toe gaan en dan SAPS vat die saak verder na die hof toe en so voort.
Ek sou nie sê SAPS blok is, maar dit is SAPS se mag in die grondwet. In the Constitution, in the Constitution and in the SAPS Act and in the Criminal Procedures Act, these pieces of law say who does what.
Yes.
And so in that, SAPS have the investigative ability, the NPA, the DOJ and the DCS each play their role. We hand over, and our investigative powers are limited. According to the police, we have no investigative powers. They don't believe we have any investigators. Over time, because there's so much pressure from the public, we've stepped up our game. We have started doing things where you can't do this thing without doing some investigations. It's impossible to deal with gangsters and chase gangsters around and arrest them without learning what they're doing and gathering information. So on the gang enforcement side, that's something that used to be a complete SAPS thing. When I started in council, the city didn't touch the gangs issue. When we first said, we're going to start doing this against the gangsters, or we decided we were going to start raiding gang properties, we were laughed at. SAPS tried to block us. Members of ours who executed warrants. And in Mitchell's Plain, there was a senior police member who often is very vocal in the media, who took action against our staff members, where we tried to execute warrants. So there was not agreement that even that we were allowed to do. So every one of these things where we've stepped up, be it marine enforcement, metal theft, liquor enforcement, gang enforcement, helping SAPS against kidnapping for ransom, increasingly trying to assert ourselves against the extortionists that make so many people's lives miserable, and the investigative and crime intelligence spaces. In all of these things, we are pushing to help SAPS more, to do more, but in each of those cases, national government is disputing our powers. This is the subject of this whole negotiation around this agreement that we're supposed to be signing with SAPS and with the provincial government, and that thing is stalled, mainly because they can't agree that we have any of these powers.
Okay, Alderman, en nog 'n vraag wat mense graag wil weet is, hoekom sien ons vir law enforcement op die strand, maar ons sien nooit vir law enforcement in gemeenskappe waar daar kansgeskietery gebeur, waar daar gangs, oral is, and so people are seeing law enforcement basically on the beach, and they're seeing law enforcement in places, more affluent places, but they're saying that they are not seeing law enforcement where it really counts on the Cape Flats.
Sure. About 2/3 of our resources are now firmly on the Cape Flats, or so-called Cape Flats.
Yeah.
Not everybody likes that term. And the vast majority of our resources is sitting either in specialized units that only work in the townships and Cape Flats, your metal theft unit, your gang and drug task team, your K9 unit. These units are not working in the leafy suburbs at all. Because they're going where the crime is, and in the high crime generators are those clusters of stations with high levels of contact crime, murder, attempted murder, etc. And LEAP, which we're doing jointly with provincial government, it's 1,300 officers. They're just working in the toughest stations in the city. In the now 7 toughest stations in the city, previously 13. We've increased the resources in some of these. All of those resources are working only in these areas. So in the leafy suburbs, you'll see way less resources. And sometimes what you'll see there, as a percentage, even though it's only 10 or 20%, some of what you'll see is actually paid for by that community. It's so-called rent-a-cop. We have a rent-a-cop model. So a city improvement district or a neighborhood watch or a homeowners association can pay for extra staff in that area. So every month to our portfolio committee, they do a report called the EPIC report. Yeah. And we have published screenshots where you can actually see where all of our Metro Police vehicles are. Yes. You can see where every one of our vehicles at the moment is. And maybe what we can do is we can give you 24 hours of screenshots that we can make an image of, a moving image where you can see over a full day where our staff resources. And then you can see here in the southeast of the city, in Mitchells Plain and Khayelitsha, there you'll see big concentrations in Gugulethu, Nyanga, and in Samora Machel, in Umfuleni, in Philippi, in Hanover Park and Manenberg. You will see in Lavender Hill where these concentrations of staff sit in Delft, in our highest crime rate suburbs, is absolutely where you will see the vast majority of those resources clustered.
I can believe it, and I would like to see that, because when we're going to put this out, people are just going to say, hulle lieg,
Well, those are screenshots of where the vehicles actually are. That's what the dispatcher sees.
Dit sal eintlik baie goed wees.
Daar is wat jou dispatcher sien. So die dispatcher, wanneer jy die foon optel en jy bel ons call center, and you say, you call 107 or 021-480-7700, the call taker picks up, they start taking down the information. That goes through to the dispatcher. The dispatcher is sitting with that big screens in front of him, seeing all the resources. That screen that he or she sees where all the vehicles are and what they're doing and how long they're taking it, that is the screen that we will share. So you can see where all those resources are at any given time. We've published these before, but I'm happy to share them with you.
So it's a few days later now. It's 4:15 and I'm about to get access to the city's emergency dashboard console. Nou laat ons kyk, waar is law enforcement? So I see here in Strandfontein we got 1, 2, 3, 4 vehicles. That is currently in the area there. So let's have a look at Mitchells Plain. I see here in Morgenstead there's a vehicle. I see here on AZ Berman there's a vehicle going up there, and even there's another 2 vehicles there on Morgenstead, on the top of Morgenstead. I see here's more vehicles here in Tafelsig area. I see there's a vehicle here in Eastridge. I see there's quite a bit of vehicles in Mitchells Plain. So I see here in Philippi we have 2 vehicles here. Coming over to Ottery we actually have quite a few vehicles here. Here's a vehicle here, here's a vehicle here, here's another vehicle here, all in Ottery. Coming down to Lotus River, you can see here's a vehicle here. Here in Parkwood there's quite a few vehicles. Even here on Prince George Drive on the corner here we have a vehicle here, where you can see here. Southfield here we have in Plumstead we have a vehicle. We have a vehicle here in Retreat, between Retreat and Heathfield. Coming down to Lavender Hill, Retreat, here you can see we have quite a few vehicles here as well, even in Steenberg. Right, we're coming down here There's a lot happening here in Elsie's River. Maitland. Hanover Park has a big cluster of it here in Langa as well. Van der Bosch has a vehicle there. Hanover Park, Athlone, Guguletu, Kayalicha. And if we come further down, we can actually see that Fishhook, Noordhoek, Glencairn, Simonstown doesn't have any vehicle. That's the reserve. Doesn't have any vehicles. So if you take a general picture of it, you can see that most of where the city's vehicles are deployed is actually on the Cape Flats. It's right here. So yeah, I think this proves and gives me a better understanding of JP's point when he says that the vehicles are deployed where it is needed most. And there you can see.
Another question that always come up is when there's evictions, right? Wanneer mense nou uit hulle huis uitgesit word of whatever nou gebeur, there's eviction, people put up shacks illegally and it gets broken down now, whatever the case may be. Wanneer daar evictions gebeur, dan sien 'n mens 100 wenne, 100 law enforcement vans en 100 manne, maar wanneer daar gun skote afgaan in ons gemeenskap, dan sien ons nie vir law enforcement nie.
So ek dink as jy nou met gemeenskappe praat, gaan hulle vir jou sê hulle sien law enforcement baie en nie altyd SAPS nie.
Yeah.
Because we are now deployed most of our resources in the area where most of the crime's happening. Because you're asking me all these questions as if my job is SAPS's job. As if I'm supposed to be doing that which SAPS is doing. And that's not quite fair. That's like me going to the mall and you have a hairdressing salon. And next door to you is a mechanic, but the mechanic screwed up my car. But now the mechanic isn't there to talk to. So I go into the hairdressing salon and I scream at the hairdresser about the car that isn't working. And because I'm always in these meetings and the city is always accessible, we're the ones who get shouted at. But we're being shouted at about a different service provider who does not have the resources and is not being effective because they've been let down by national government. They've been chopped off at the knees in terms of capacity. So if you look at the three spheres of government, national government is responsible for SAPS. SAPS's job is crime prevention. They're supposed to do the heavy lifting on protecting. They're supposed to detect and prevent and investigate crime, make the arrest. They're supposed to be dealing with your major crime fighting agency. The city has traffic and bylaw enforcement. That's if you go to all the other municipalities, they don't have a metro police. They have traffic and bylaw enforcement, and the jobs of those two is to enforce the municipal bylaws and to enforce the traffic regulations. When we don't do those two things, that no longer gets done. SAPS doesn't suddenly start doing it, but we are still expected to go do all of SAPS's job plus our own job.
Can you give us a brief? Kan JP net vir ons so klein bietjie verduidelik as JP sê municipal bylaws en wat is die municipal bylaws? Watter bylaws
So onthou, elke sfeer van die regering maak wette. Nasionale regering maak wette wat vir die hele Suid-Afrika van toepassing is. Provinsiale regering maak wette vir die provinsie. Die stad maak wette vir ons stad. Baie van die wette wat regtig saak maak vir gemeenskappe is bylaws. Your environmental health bylaw that tries to prevent toxic things in the environment from making a community sick, that deals with the food quality, that all these kind of things. Those are all municipal bylaws. They get enforced by municipal inspectors, be it a health inspector, a building inspector, a land use inspector, a waste inspector, or law enforcement, who enforces most of our bylaws. So your streets and public places bylaw that deals with what the public do in public, your animal keeping bylaws around people, how they deal with animals, canines, cart horses, other animals in communities. See, we're working on a bylaw around scrapyards and some of these problematic businesses, the trading regulation bylaw. Many of these bylaws, like your problem building bylaw and other stuff that deals with slum houses that become a problem to the community over time, those are enforced by law enforcement. And then there's also the traffic regulations, the National Road Traffic Act. It's a piece of national law. There are some provincial traffic regulations. The city also has a traffic bylaw. and that has to be also enforced by our traffic department. So that's their main business. That's every municipality moet vir hulle self uitsort in terme van hulle eie wette, hulle bylaws, municipal ordinances en die traffic laws. SAPS is bedoel om die crime prevention to do. But because over time, SAPS has suffered so much in terms of the reduction of their resources and their capacity over time, all the municipalities are under increasing pressure to step into that gap. And so that means we must add more and more policing all the time to do this crime prevention role. This is actually not our core business, but we're not complaining about doing it. We must do it, and we're stepping up ever more. That's why we're adding another 700 officers now in this new budget to distribute to communities. So we'll have a handful of officers in every ward in the city now. In addition to the 1,300 LEAP members, we'll have a handful of officers now in every single ward in the city. We'll have more staff to do escort duties so that the services who have to go into hotspot communities can do their work without interference by criminals, so we can render services faster. But that money must come from somewhere. And in council, there's a fixed budget. There's a fixed amount of money. If you decide this part of the budget needs more money for safety and security, then something else must get less money. Or more money must come in to pay for it. And this year, that's what's happening in the budget. We are trying to bring in a bit more money to pay for all this extra policing. And why do we have to constantly do the extra policing? Because SAPS's numbers is less than half of what they should be.
So, net om my, just to wrap my mind around it, so the bylaws means the smaller kind of crimes and the smaller kind of things to keep order. As where SAPS does the big things like, the...
SAPS will do contract crime, serious violent crime, rape, murder, attempted murder,
No, I just wanted to...
commercial crime, that kind of stuff. Municipal bylaws generally are codes for good living.
Okay. I see here we did basically answer that. What do law enforcement and Metro have the authority to do? And why does criminals end up back on the street, like you said?
I think that, remember, once we hand a criminal over to SAPS, the SAPS detective must investigate.
Yes.
And there starts your problem. We're about 8,600 detectives short. The detectives have 200 or 300 dockets on their table, have a lot of cases to handle. So they have more cases that they can handle. And so what happens is a lot of those cases just go nowhere. Maybe the detective can realistically handle about 25 cases. More than that is just justice denied. That other 175 out of the 200 cases is probably going to go nowhere, no matter how hard that detective works. They're not going to get to it. And so this is a long-standing problem. National government knows it's a problem. It's a thing everybody talks about a lot. And so those cases, what often happens, for instance, in the firearms, myself and the mayor went to Hanover Park Civic Center the other day. We put up the pictures of all these 1,670 firearms that we took off the street in 4 years. And the problem is that out of those, only 80 of those got to conviction. The rest of those cases are withdrawn. They're withdrawn for lack of evidence because the prosecutor, and remember that the investigative function, prosecutorial function, justice and correctional services, that all sits in national government. Province has an oversight. I see people like to confuse the issue and say, oh, there's provincial SAPS. There's no such thing as provincial SAPS. All SAP answers to national. Answers to the national minister and the national police commissioner. There's nothing else. The provincial minister has oversight only. That's why they've changed their name so that it's clear. The provincial oversight and community safety department, because their policing oversight is their job. So policing oversight and community safety, and then the city has traffic and bylaw enforcement. And increasingly, we're doing all this crime prevention work, because if we don't do it, communities will have no sanity, will have no safety. So a lot of guns off the street now from us and other stuff. But once we've taken those guns off the street, it's that investigator must investigate it. If the investigator doesn't have the ability, or the case can't get enough evidence together, then the prosecutor won't press charges, or the ballistic labs are so overworked, they've got such a big backlog that they won't get those ballistic results back in a long time. And then those cases will get withdrawn. And so out of the almost 1,700 times that we ran after criminals, got the guns from them, from those gangsters, only 80 of those were held accountable. The rest are, by and large, they're back on the street doing the same thing they did before, because there's always more guns available to them somehow. And this is the other thing we're fighting with government about, with SAPS. So we're saying, we need you to figure out where these guns are coming from. You need to block wherever this pipeline of guns is. We need you to block wherever this ammunition is coming from. Because we're somehow finding the guys with boxer ammunition, new ammunition, not reloads or something, new ammo with the manufacturer's mark on, in the box still. So
So it
somewhere
must be
there is a
coming-
major
coming,
pipeline of stuff, and
yeah.
crime intelligence needs to figure out where that is, and they need to find a way to shut that down, because that is causing much of the misery, and that unfortunately is not in our power. And when we do these things, you will see that I'm accused of deploying powers that we don't have.
Yes.
We're threatened with prosecution and other stuff. So it's a frustrating situation for us, and that's why probably in the next year we will be in court with national government to try and forcibly devolve some of those powers to local and provincial government, so that we can do some of these things without getting stuck behind under-resourced SAPs.
So my mind was also like, when I heard of the GNU and I saw, okay, we're going to government of national unity, I thought that we would have more powers over, like, SAPs. So
Works
can you just-
work.
yeah.
Works work.
So
So, I
that
mean,
doesn't. So the fact that this is the GNU, it doesn't even give you more leeway in SAPs or more power
So-
in SAPs.
There are all those different portfolios in national government.
Yeah.
So Home Affairs, Public Works, Deputy Minister of Finance, Basic Education, Agriculture. These are things now where we have some influence. Other parties got other portfolios like sports and arts and culture. And the ANC kept all those policing portfolios. So justice, correctional services, and police firmly in the hands. And in fact, the minister and the two deputy ministers of police, all three of those are ANC.
Yeah.
So they've kept those portfolios very firmly in the hands of the African National Congress. I'm hoping that will change over time. One day, government will look different, and control will move out of the ANC, because that they have sat with control over this police force now since 1994, since the inception of our democracy. It is now 30 years plus later, and our police force is really, really struggling. The criminal justice system, that whole value chain is in their hands. That's really, really struggling. And in the meantime, every time JP goes to a public meeting and Jordan goes to a public meeting, the provincial government meeting, we are getting punished. We are getting hit because of the dissatisfaction with it. And the community is right to be dissatisfied. I am as dissatisfied as they are. And I speak to the provincial government and I ask them to do a commission of inquiry into the gang violence thing. I'm using the same language that community members used in that meeting. I'm as angry as they are about this. So there are a few things we can do. Going to court to devolve powers is one of them. Commission of inquiry may well be another.
Is it just under JP's portfolio? Is it only the law enforcement that is there, or what else is there?
So I wish we could take all the money and just put it on enforcement services, but there are even, just as within the city, the Safety and Security Directorate competes with water and electricity and human settlements and roads and parks and recreation and clinics and all these other functions that must happen in local government. Street lights that have to get repaired, the electricity and water repairs and maintenance, and the huge amounts of money that we're now investing in that, more in the Cape Town budget in a year than in Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni and Tshwane together. To try and make sure that our infrastructure remains functioning. So we are competing against all these other departments, but even in safety and security, we have to distribute the resources, because there's disaster management and everything we have to do there. There's the three enforcement services, traffic, law enforcement, and Metro Police. And then, of course, there's the fire department. The fire department's a big issue. It's the biggest department in the directorate. It's got the most sophisticated resources in terms of fire engines and hydraulic platforms and water tankers and skid units. And if nobody else is going to do that, if we're not doing the firefighting, it stops. And you see that the fire departments in many municipalities in this country are broken. They're almost dysfunctional. In big cities, you sometimes have a single fire engine only that's on run, or one or two fire engines only. A single fire station that works properly. So resources are in a really bad state because they've been afgeskipt. So we can't do that. We have to have a functioning fire department. Probably have the best one in the country at the moment. But that's also competing for budget.
Very much for giving us a general overview of what it is that that you do and how things actually really work.
Afwan, meneer Richards,
Ja,
Afwan.
So it's clear to me that it doesn't matter how many law enforcement officers the city employ. It doesn't matter how much money we invest in safety and security. The problem is sitting with SAPs. And SAPs are letting the criminals back out into the street. So as you heard, JP is going to take SAPs to court because the only way to get the city right is to actually get the devolution of power. And yeah.